to steal. No other way to describe it other than steal. Nakobe Dean in the third round. After draft weekend here on Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We appreciate you streaming on in. I'm Jody McDonald. He's John McMullen. And we've both been just inundated with draft stuff for the last 3 days. We'll give you a whole bunch of our thoughts today, and we'll get up a couple of guests to lend their voice as well. J-Mac, we spoke at last on Friday after round one, which, of course, is the major and significant round, not only for the Philadelphia Eagles, but all the teams in the National Football League. It's just that the Eagles might have come away with more additional talent after round one than anyone else, numbers-wise, and already proven production in the National Football League with A.J. Brown, which left us days 2 and 3 and many less Eagle picks than we thought we were getting prior to the start of the draft, because they had to position themselves to get in the right spot to be able to take the two top flight players that they took. Was it any bit of a letdown for you? Because we came in, Eagles had 10 picks, right? Before the whole draft proceeding started, they had 10.
That part was anything but a letdown. That part was exciting. From our perspective, we're rooting for Howie to continue to trade and don't get back in. But for the volume people, I'd like to call them, they're probably a little bit upset. But when it comes to day 3 picks and measuring them against an AJ Brown or even a Jordan Davis, I'm with Les Snead, man. F them picks. I don't care how many you give up. Those are lottery tickets. Every draft pick is a lottery ticket, but as Howie and every general manager will tell you, picks are not, they're not even. There's a big difference from the top of the draft down to the 7th round. So, look, they got 2 potential difference makers in the draft. They got 1 difference maker. We know that. We've seen him play. That's the one thing Nick Sirianni said. We said after day 1 is like, there's no projection here. He saw him in Indianapolis before he got here. Nobody else is sitting there saying that about their first round picks. They feel good about him. And this includes Jordan Davis with the Eagles as well. Eagles feel good about him, but nobody knows 100%. All the way up from Trayvon Walker down to Lewis Cine, bookends, of course, by Georgia in that first round. All of it's projection. But A.J. Brown isn't. So I was, very comfortable with the Eagles trading those picks and getting those particular players. But, some people just like volume and they want more picks. The one thing that kind of makes up for that is, and Howie said this before, not after. So, he was kind of telling the truth. And he's not the only one. This was one of the deepest undrafted classes in history because of the COVID, changes, the extra year, kids staying in school. Just the volume of it was so much larger. So there were more players to pick from. And the Eagles got some kids with draftable grades on the undrafted free agent market. So maybe you can look at them as some extra draft picks if it makes you feel good. But, I'd give up, if I could, I'd give up more picks to get A.J. Brown and Jordan Davis.
And
day 3 picks.
Day 3 picks, I understand what you're saying. And the point you make about it being a larger undrafted class than ever before because of COVID and the like, you're right. Howie Roseman said that prior to draft, and he wasn't the only one who said it. Guys we've had on as guests here on the show said the same exact thing, that there'll be some quality guys whose names will not be called over the 3 days. And if you can get them into your program, you can get an undrafted free agent who might be on the equivalent level of a 6th round pick or a 7th round pick. So you're right. The volume of the picks is not something that I question at all. The quality of the picks, I don't know how anybody questions, because A.J. Brown basically counts as a pick. He's an established star wide receiver in the league. Got to pay for him. They had to give up decent capital, get him, and sign him to the contract extension, which I think is a plus, because it shows that the Eagles realize you can't just draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to be dictated to by the other teams in the National Football League. Yeah, you are. And yeah, you were. And yeah, you responded by signing A.J. Brown to a 4-year contract extension. So that's a good sign if you're an Eagle fan as well. The fact that they got Cam Jurgens, a guy that you and I talked about before the draft ever happened. I told you Tony Pauline, my guy, told me before the draft he would rank him as the number 1 center ahead of Linderbaum, who went in the first round. So the Eagles get Jason Kelsey's replacement in a second. Does it fill an immediate need? No. If you get a guy who can hold down the center position for the Eagles for 6, 7, 8 years after Jason Kelsey retires, is it worth it? Second round pick? I surely believe so. To steal, no other way to describe it other than steal, Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round. This whole pec injury thing that came up. I know we're banking on the Eagles doctors having a better read than every other doctor in the league, which is a little shaky water and ice to be on. But still, they say he's going to practice this week, John. He's going to come right in and he's ready to rock and roll. How bad can his injury be if he's going to jump in first week of rookie training?
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about that, because I got more information on sort of the Nakobe Dean slide. But generally with all these things, when players slide significantly, even before 99% it's medically related. Sometimes there's some off the field stuff, but when you see a pretty significant slide, it's almost all the time medically related. And that was the case with some other. Carson Strong, they signed as an undrafted free agent, completely medically related. He was probably going to be early in the process. You could say he was going to be a day 3 pick, a 3rd round pick. And then, the worst case would be early day 3, but his knee is just too troublesome for too many teams. And he became undrafted, and then it's worth a flyer. With Nakobe, I was the same as you. I'm like, well, even if he needs surgery on his pec, that's a 6-month injury, maybe 8 months, worst case scenario. Even if you got a red shirt half his rookie season, even if you got a red shirt all his rookie season, that to me is comparable to David Ojabo, went in the 2nd round to Baltimore, I believe. That explains like a little bit of a drop, because there's no real concern. He's a young kid, it's not a 35-year-old player. The more from other teams' perspectives is he's had injuries in the past. He's had a knee injury and he's had a shoulder injury. And they think that stuff is more chronic, and there's a chance that it could be an issue moving forward. And we'll see who's right. But the pec part never made sense to me, because that's kind of clear cut and you're cutting out 6-8 months and then everything's back. But there's more concerns than that with Nakobe Dean, and that kind of explains the fall. And we'll see who's right. Yeah, I mean, if he's healthy, I never thought he was a 1st round pick because of the value the league places on the position plus his size. But a worst case scenario, you're talking late 1st, early 2nd round pick if he's got the P, as Howie Roseman says, the complete pass on the medicals. So to get somebody like that in the 3rd round is incredible value from just a talent perspective. And then, then it comes down to the medicals. That's all it comes down to. Are the Eagles right, or are the rest of the league right? Now, Howie claims teams were going to consider starting to take him there in the 3rd round. So he's probably right. He usually has a good feel for those types of things. He did say that the 2 players on their board magically, how often does this happen, Jody, at 51? It was Cam Jurgens or Nakobe Dean. Shane Steichen was texting, Hey, Cam's still there, and Jonathan Gannon was texting Nick Sirianni, hey, Nakobe's still there. Yeah, and magically the Eagles got both players. I don't believe that part of it. I think they're blowing a little bit smoke there, but they got a good player in the third round value. It's all medical from here. I mean, he can play. It's how long is he going to play? How healthy is he going to be?
I'll give you a quick story along those same lines. Give me 2 minutes here, Eagle fans, because it's worth telling, and McMullen will appreciate it. How often does it happen where you're deciding between two players and you end up getting both of the players anyway? My father's last year with the New York Mets. He had been let go as their general manager, stuck around as their assistant general manager. New ownership brought in Frank Cash, and they would have Frank to be the guy. And my father understood it. He eventually left and went to St. Louis, won a World Series with Whitey Herzog. But anyway, he stayed 1 year with the Mets as their assistant general manager. Prior to the draft, the Mets had the first pick and the 21st pick in the draft, and they were caught between two players. One of them was Darryl Strawberry. The other was Billy Beane.
Billy Beane, yeah.
One of the more important executives in Major League Baseball over the last 25 years. And it truly was a toss-up between those two players. And Frank Cashin asked my father, he said, Joe, can you do me a solid? Get on a plane, fly out to L.A. Strawberry is playing in a high school tournament 3 days before the draft. I need somebody's eyes I trust. Go out and look at him. He went out, Strawberry hit 2 home runs. If my father came back and said, his swing looks like Ted Williams. We need to take this kid. So they did. So they take Strawberry at 1. Billy Beane is still sitting there at 21. So the Mets, they were going to take Billy Beane first. They ended up taking him 21st, and he was a cup of coffee guy in the major leagues, much more well-known for his general manager status afterwards. But it does happen from time to time. So I'm going to believe the Eagles. They might have taken Nakobe Dean at the second round with the Jurgens pick, and they end up getting him in the third anyway. Those previous injuries for Nakobe Dean, yet they hampered him so bad. He was the best tight end in college football this year. Really, really cut down on his production caused all those previous injuries. Sometimes these teams overthink it. I'm very glad that the Eagles didn't overthink it and took Nakobe Dean. So I just stone cold love what the Eagles did in the first 3 rounds of the draft. But because they did what they did, they didn't have a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I mean,
pick.
Yeah,
Kyron Johnson, an inside linebacker, after you took Nakobe Dean? Really?
Yeah, he's not he's not an inside linebacker. I know a lot of people graded him as that. If you heard Andy White on, people probably tapped out by that point late Saturday night. He played the edge on at Kansas, and he's sort of like an Hassan Reddick type player. In fact, he on our Zoom call with him, he compared himself to Hassan Reddick. I said, slow down, buddy. I did. That's the 13th overall pick back in the day. So there's a big difference, but he's that type of player. He's more of an edge rusher, very undersized, and he's pretty good at it in Kansas. But then Howie interjected and said, he had 17 special teams tackles. He was a special teams captain. He runs a 4-4. He's a special teams pick. The Eagles were really, really bad in coverage last year. They were really, really bad in special teams, basically. Everything but kicking, where Jake Elliott was great. They couldn't return well. They couldn't cover well. And if you go back to the Eagles' history, far from sexy, but you talk about players like Chris Maragos and Brian Brayman. Well, they didn't help you much on defense, but they were great, great special teams players. You don't even have to go back far to Rudy Ford, who people forget. Rudy Ford was tremendous when he was healthy as a special teams player, which wasn't often the latter part. But that's what I think Tehran is here for, to be a special teams player. And hopefully he can help as a backup linebacker. But the way Andy talked about him, he just talked about leverage, edge rush. So that to me means the Eagles are going to project him at Sam linebacker, not inside linebacker. But that's a deep backup anyway. Just right now, Hassan Reddick and Patrick Johnson.
We'll see if Kyron Johnson can be as big a special teams contributor as the guys you just rattled off in comparison to. They are some of the best special teams players the Eagles had in the last decade and a half. I hope he's that kind of player. I don't know that he's that kind of player yet, as is with a lot of draft picks. It's all projection. And then they come back with a backup tight end, Greg Calcaterra. Why? He's going to be better.
They need a backup. They need a backup tight end. They're not comfortable. You know, Jack Stoll did a nice job after the Zach Ertz trade as an undrafted free agent, but there's a lot of caveats in there as an undrafted free. You know, I mean, there's not a great upside there. There's not.
There's great upside with Greg Calcaterra.
Well, there's more. I would say that Grant Calcaterra. He's also he's one of those. You know, he's another friend of Jalen Hurts, which Jalen Hurts has more friends than anybody else I've ever known.
More pull, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the one thing, because remember, I say all the time, Tyree Jackson tore his ACL in week 18. So it's a developmental player who doesn't have time to develop in the offseason because he's rehabbing. Jack Stoll, as I mentioned, worst case scenario, you can play him. You still have Richard Rodgers, who they're always looking to replace. JJ's trying to make the transition. You can't count on that. So now they have another tight end who knows how to play the position. The one thing that bothers me about that pick is because I could see him winning the second tight end job, but he's more of a flex tight end. And I say this all the time, you know, Dallas Goedert is one of the few tight ends, probably him and George Kittle, a little bit of Mark Andrews, who can, you know, be more of the old school tight end of, you know, they can play in line, they can block, right, and they can go out and flex and be dominant receivers. There aren't a lot of those guys. But, you know, because Dallas can do that and play in line, I think the Eagles do it a little bit too much because he's so explosive as a receiver. Like, I want him to be the flex tight end. And Grant Calcaterra isn't going to be a blocking tight end. So if you're going to play Grant, you're going to have Dallas in line. And I think that isn't the best way to go about it. So nitpicking, but it's important. Maybe A.J. Brown, his presence, you know, affords you more opportunity to play Dallas Goedert in line. So it is nitpicking, but I thought it made some sense. They needed, you know, if they had 10 picks, I knew they were going to draft a tight end at some point. In other words, if they stayed stagnant, they were going to bring one in.
Right. But here's the deal, John. They didn't have 10 picks. They had 5. And
they
used one on a tight end.
But that was one of those positions. And in the 7th round, I guess you're talking about, yeah, they have bigger needs, cornerback and safety. But, you know, at that point, it truly is, you know, who do you think is the best player at that point? You know, what good does it do? And the Eagles ended up signing 3 undrafted corners. A couple of them had draftable grades. So, you know, you just take the best player in the 7th round.
In the 6th round is where they took Calcaterra, which
6th round, yeah.
So that a little bit earlier,
but late in the draft.
But I think you've already got at least possible potential backup players. So I gave him an A+ after the first 3 rounds. A+, not A plus. From there on, and readily admit, part of what allowed you to be A+ was you had to give up draft capital to be able to get those players. I don't like either of their picks in the 6th round. And you mentioned the fact that day after free agency, undrafted free agents, they've already inked 3 cornerbacks. How many safeties have they signed?
They signed 1 an undrafted free agent, kid by the name of Reed Blankenship. If you have that Middle Tennessee State film, you know, put it in there. So that's what they got at
Reed Blankenship from Middle Tennessee State, huh?
Yeah.
2 words. Go Epsy. The way they're playing this, they're making it look like they're perfectly fine with Epsy stepping into the starting role, not just the 3rd guy, the situational substitution guy, the starting guy. Epsy for the Eagles. How do you just completely ignore the safety position? I know that it's a not as valued position as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but nada. Blankenship
we
from
would,
Mid-Tennessee State. That's it, Johnny Mac.
Howie says all the time, and he's right, and he'll bring up, mainly the cornerback position as well with Ronald Darby. Constantly brings that up in August. And Steve Nelson last year, 2 days before camp. I think they're going to bring in another safety. The problem is you already have the Saints weren't able to get a safety, and they're already evidently amping up things with Tyrann Mathieu. So, he's in New Orleans. I've always said if he has an opportunity to play in New Orleans, he's going to play in New Orleans. So we'll see how that shakes out. But they'll get somebody somewhere.
Okay.
It's May 2nd. If they had to play a game today, it would be Marcus Epps. And by the way, Marcus Epps is better than people give him credit for. I don't know. He's one of those guys Eagles fans get upset about. He played pretty well. Howie constantly says we like him more than maybe people outside the building. He talks about the room in general. Now, when he brings up Andre Satchare, then I roll my eyes. Not Marcus Epps. Marcus can play a little bit. But yeah, they got it. They still have to add a body.
At least Marcus Epps did play this past year. Andre Satchare hardly ever got on the field. Epps did actually play. Not sure if he's a full-time starting safety. I give you one name. Howie, if you're listening. If anybody knows Howie, get this to Howie. Here's the guy who the Eagles could pair in the back with Anthony Harris as their starting safety. Chuck Clark, who was a starter for the Ravens the last 2 years, had a pretty damn good year last year. They go out and sign the New Orleans safety, and then because the Eagles jumped him on draft day, they end up with Kyle Hamilton. They've got 2 potential star safeties, and Chuck Clark was a pretty damn good starting safety for him last year, had like 12 passes defended, had 2 interceptions, which for the Eagles, the only guy who ever gets any interceptions is Big Play Slay. They could use a little bit of a ball hawk and a combo player. Chuck Clark, I got to believe, is readily available. The Ravens already have their starting safeties. Both are new, and they'll incorporate them, but both of them are star-level type players. How we go out and get Chuck Clark. And you don't have to give up a draft pick for 12 months because there's no more drafts for 12 months. So feel free to go ahead and give up that draft pick because they need to upgrade the safety position. Take your run at Honey Badger. If you can somehow top the Saints and suck them in here to Philadelphia, more power to you. I don't know if they've got the cap wherewithal to do so, but if they do, go ahead and do that. If not, be ready to trade for Chuck Clark of the Ravens, guy that the Eagles should be targeting. All right, we're targeting here on Birds 365 our buddy Ian Cummings. He's going to join us next, has been on with us a couple times before the draft. We want to get his after the draft review here with us on Birds 365.